Hi there, this is Moin and you're watching C for Absolute Beginners. This video will go through the background of programming languages and will introduce you to the first code that you can easily write in C. So a bit background of programming language, because this entire course is for absolute beginners who have no idea about programming or no previous experience in programming and want to start programming for themselves. So I'm going to keep this to lesson 1. So the first thing that anyone who wants to start programming must know is you write certain instructions in a notepad. You can literally use this notepad as well to write your codes. But the thing is, you need specific instructions to compile it, and it is hard to debug. So we have a lot of environments, that is IDEs. So IDEs is called Integrated Development Environment. So you have these IDEs that come with a compiler and a notepad where you can easily write your code and it compiles it for you. And if you have no idea what a compiler is, then don't worry, it's meant to be for beginners, so I'll be going through each and every step. Now, C language, as you're learning C language, so you must have some motive behind it. And I can't spell language properly. Anyway, so C language is a middle level programming language because the middle level language. So what does it mean? So we have high level languages like Java, C#. So in high level languages, it is easier for any programmer to write a piece of code. Not easy, but it's comparatively easier to write codes, where in the absolute low level language like assembly, you basically write computer instructions but using symbols quite practically. So that is really difficult for anyone to start, and it's really tedious because for instance, assembly does not give you any I/O or so that does not give you any input or output functions or any structures to follow. Is basically a programmer needs to do all by themselves. But in a high level language, you have a lot of things done for you. You have it's much more easier to get in. So the thing is, with C#, Java, Python, they are high level language. It's not close to machine. Hence, the way you write a code may not translate in a way the machine works. So the elements are different. Elements are different to what you write in your code and how it translates to the machine, or how the programmer translates. So often these programs are slower than assembly language programs, but again, so it is faster, but it takes more effort, right? So C language being the middle language, I always say it's a sweet spot. So it's closer to machine language, closer to the machine basically, and it gives you a bit of everything. So hence it's been the sweet spot for over like since 1970s. And you have C++ as well. That's the object-oriented version of it. Anyway, so C is used for system programming. So if you have system software that you want to make, let's say for operating system or a compiler, again, you may not know what a compiler is, or a notepad. So anything that any software that runs the computer or system software or system programs, you use C for that. C was primarily designed for that and still is used for that purpose. So C language, so functions, we need to know this term called functions before we get into anything. So functions, they are the building block of the language. Now, what's a function? A function is basically where you write instructions to solve a problem. That's what a function is, where you write instructions. So you write a function that can be used somewhere else by other functions, and you can use it for yourself as well, and you solve a specific problem with it. And in C, you will have a lot of functions, but mainly a function that you must need. It's called the main function. So it is a must. So in a C program, you must have at least one function in order for it to work, and that is the main function. So you need the main function for your program to work. Now inside a function you write codes, right? You write instructions to solve a problem. But what do you call them? You call them statements. So that is a piece of code. Basically, we'll be getting into that. Now, a piece of code ends with a semicolon. Okay, computer doesn't understand the return or the enter like this one. At the end of the line, you need to specify it using the semicolon. Okay, so as I said earlier, you can write your code even in this notepad, and you can compile it. That's where the compiler comes into play. So compiler translates this whatever code you may write into a form of machine language for it to execute. So again, we will have a bit of trouble doing that for our new programmer. So I will be using code blocks for that specific reason. Code blocks is an IDE where you can write your code and it will compile it for you. So this is what code blocks look like. So it's a piece of software where you write your code, right? Now, C, before I write anything, C language is case sensitive. Now, if you are familiar with it, familiar with what case sensitivity is, it is basically case and maybe case. These are, it may look the same to you and me, but are different in C language. So these are three different entities completely. So this is what I mean by case sensitivity. So when you write a code, make sure to write what you intend, because you may write case in this order, but it's supposed to be in this order. It won't make sense to the computer. Right, so I guess we are ready to start writing our code. However, we may need to familiarize ourselves with something else called header files and library. Now, we all know what a library is. We all know what a library is. It's where you go and find books, right? You find references and everything. So in C, we have something called library functions. So in 1989, I believe, ANSI were put together by, I think, a group of developers or something. I'm not sure about that. So they gave some standard library functions. So as I said, function is the building block of C language. So they gave us some standard library functions that helps us do inputs, outputs, basic maths. We can work with sentences. So these are built in these library functions. And the header files, well, these are basically the addresses, like the reference number, calling number. If you go to a library and ask a librarian about a book, he or she will tell you where it is, right? So header files are basically that. It just gives you the address. It just gives the compiler the addresses of where the library functions are. Okay, so you may be using a function that is defined in this library function that is in the library. So let's say you're using a book that is in this library, but someone does not know where it is from. So you tell them, go check the header files, and it will give them the address of the book. So we need to understand the library functions and header files. So it'll help you understand what I'm going to write now. So let's start our first piece of code. Now you can start writing in a various way in code blocks, but the easiest way that even without any keystroke, you can just click this button over here. That's a new file button, and it will give you a lot of options, class, project. I'll just do empty file because that's the easy bit of C. You don't need any classes or anything. Classes are part of C++ that we are not focusing on. So I'll just create an empty file, and there you go. You have a notepad where you can write as many code as you like. But obviously, these will not make sense to the computer. So when the compiler that comes with the C code blocks compiles it and translates it to machine language, it won't make sense, right? So we need to follow certain certain syntaxes. So as I said, the first bit I do is I'll add the header files. So I'll just tell the compiler where the codes are situated, sort of, that I'm gonna write. So to do that, we use a keyword called #include, then this less than sign and greater than sign. And inside the less than greater than sign, I'll just write down the library header, that is stdio. Now this is a general library. It's basically standard. STD stands for standard IO. It's not studio. I can't tell you how many times I thought it is studio, but it is not. It is standard input and output. So the code I'm going to be writing is about printing a line. So I'm using this header file, standard input output.h. Now you do have all these library functions. You can look them up if you need to know any specific directory, but I will be showing that as I go along in the code. So after this, after the library function, so after the header files comes this bit, main. As I said, we need to follow certain rules. Oh, before that, stdio, you can also write it in like this, and they're the same thing just for this bit though. But the convention is you write the headers in small, all small, not capital. Okay. Now, next bit, we don't need any semicolon to finish this sentence. Okay, it's just the header file. This is its own syntax. So main, we write down int main, and then this set of brackets, and I'll hit enter just to make it look good, and then the opening bracket, opening second bracket, and closing second bracket, right? So these are called parentheses. This is called opening parentheses, closing parentheses. And in C, any function, any piece of function that you write has this structure, that is return type, name of function, these first brackets, second brackets, and opening brace, closing brace. This is how a C function should look like. Now, if you look closely, we have pretty much the same structure here as well. Main is the name of the function, then followed by this opening and closing first brackets, and then the parentheses, opening parentheses and closing parentheses. And int is the return type here. Don't worry about this at the moment. Maybe we'll talk about it in the second lesson. And inside of this opening brackets and opening and closing parentheses, you have all of your codes. Okay, all of your codes go inside. The compiler starts reading from line 1 till it reaches the end of the parentheses, like in the left hand side. Okay, so let's save this work first, then we'll start our code. To save, I'll say Control S is the easiest way. So if you press Control S, you can also do, you can click on this button as well. So I'm gonna click on this button, and I created a folder called C language YouTube, and I'll save it here. I'll call it output.c. Now, this is an important part. So you need to save your files with a .c extension. So I'll put it here. So you need to save your work with a .c extension. So that's an important bit. So make sure to do that. So output.c, it'll be just a piece of program that will output some text onto the screen. Then click save. And if everything is all right, you'll see your code has changed colors. Now it knows that it is a C program. It knows a directory. It sees a function structure. See, look closely, it has a function structure, return type, name of the function, circular brackets, and these then parentheses. Now, this bit inside the brackets, we pass the values that this function may work with. Now, a function may work with no value, may work with one value, or may work with multiple values. So if it works with, let's say, 2 values or 3 values, it should be separated using a comma, okay? And if it's working with no values, just leave it as it is. And if it's working with 1 value, just pass the value here. Now, don't worry about this. Now, we will talk about this a lot, maybe in class 4 or 5. Just leave it void right now. Now, the actual syntax, it actually takes, it has 2 parameters, but I'm going to be keeping it void for the time being. So this is not our main focus for this class. We'll be writing a code and executing. That's going to be the main focus. As I said, the standard input and output library gives us some predefined functions. That means it's already defined. So one function is called printf. So printf is used, oopsies. Printf function is used to print texts onto the screen rather. And it's a very versatile function. You can do a lot of stuff with it. So printf parentheses semicolon. As printf is considered as a piece of code because it is in part of the standard input-output library, it is considered a code. Hence, we need this semicolon at the very end, right? So inside the parentheses, if you put these quotations, and inside the quotations, if you write anything, I'll say hello to C for beginners. So whatever you write inside the quotations will pop up onto your screen, right? Not the quotations themselves though. And this structure here that you're looking at, the sentence inside the quotations, are called strings. So in C, if you put anything inside the quotations are called strings. Basically, the definition of string is there are multiple characters. You see, there are multiple characters. And we have this thing called commenting using the backslash. So I am commenting. So this is what we use to write comments and to make our code more readable. I'm going to keep it to the single line comments for this class. So I'll just write this code prints text on the console. Okay, so for anyone who's reading my code and does not know what it does, you can easily look at this and say, okay, so this code will actually print something to my console. Now, this may not look that useful here, but think of the actual programmers and actual softwares. You have hundreds and thousands of lines of code. If you're working in a project, your group mate or project mate gives you a piece of code and you have no idea whatsoever. So you read the comments. It makes your life a lot easier. I wish my co-workers commented a bit more, but that's a different discussion. Anyways, so this is how you comment. So anything you write after the double slashes will not be considered as code. It's just for commenting purposes. Okay. Before we execute this, I want to say we have another bit called return. See, this one has changed colors as well because the keyword of C we have to use it. It's a reserved keyword. So you do return 0. Now you may ask, what is this? It's first of all a sentence because it's terminating with a semicolon. Now, if your program terminates correctly, it sends a value to the operating system, and the operating system can check the value. So if the value is 0, that means your program worked correctly. So that's just a convention. You need to pass now you don't, but if you do send this value 0, and if everything goes correctly, operating system knows that your program ended gracefully. That means it ended correctly. Okay, and as you can see, I can put as many enters, as many white spaces as I want. It ain't gonna matter. You might have guessed correctly. It really doesn't matter. So white spaces and enters and returns, they don't matter in your code as long as they're not followed by a semicolon or anything. So this is the build button. That means it builds your code and translates it into machine language, and it runs it. And this button, build and run, basically builds it and runs it. Okay. Now if I run it, you may not even. It will just so it's building, right? Well, sure again. So if you run it, it takes a bit of time. Why does it take a bit of time? So it translates all these codes into machine language and then puts something up on the console. And this is what the console is, or you call it command prompt, or you can call it terminal F for Mac. So if you see what I've written down here, hello to C for beginners, this is what it prints up without the quotations. And you see process returns 0. That is, it returns 0 to the operating system, and that means your program worked perfectly. Cool. Now you can add as many printfs as you like. There's no hard and fast. It's up to you how many sentences you can print. You can do this as well. Hey, printf I printf am. Okay. Now, so the next bit now is how will it look? If I run it, you'll see it looks pretty hard to read. Hello to C for beginners. Hey, I am. So you put a \n after the sentence to make it go in a new line. Okay, so this is the \n. If you put it, and you'll see that it goes to a new line. It's more readable now, isn't it? So I want you guys to play around with this bit, with the \n and printfs, and make yourself comfortable with the idea of printfs, and how you do tell the compiler where to look for the function printf. So it doesn't know what a printf is, so you tell it, go to and look in this directory. So thank you for this part. Thank you for watching. I'll be back with the next bit. In the next bit, we may be talking about a bit of variables and a bit more about print function. Thank you and stay tuned.